Thank you and welcome everybody for joining us for the first edition of CPAC Live. Here we're so pleased that so many of our CPAC 2020 attendees are able to register, and we're glad to have everybody join us again as we struggle, as we manage to get through our moments of quarantine. ACU Chairman Matt Schlapp is going to join us here in just a moment. Thanks to our pals Annabelle, and Carly, and Karin, and Zach, and of course, ACU Executive Director Dan Schneider, who helps to make all of these things possible. As we look back on CPAC 2020, you guys were all there. You remember that our theme for that event was America versus socialism. And we wonder, as we look at all of these things that are happening across America at this time, what is the state of that fight? And that's what we're going to ask Matt Schlapp about as he comes to join us. What's it mean to defeat coronavirus? What should we be looking for as far as declaring victory over coronavirus and getting the economy rolling again? There have been about 250,000 people in America. 740,000, 740 some folks test positive. We're around 60,000 folks who have passed away as a result of coronavirus, if you're going to believe the data that we see online. And we also want to make sure that the job numbers somehow stem the bleeding. 5 million folks applied for unemployment last week, putting the number north of 20 million, 22 million folks out of work as a result of this. And it also seems like Democrats and progressives and liberals seem to want to embrace this moment in a way that they haven't before. And there's our friend, Matt Schlapp. Matt Schlapp, welcome aboard the first ever episode of CPAC Live. How are you, man?
Great to be with you, Ian, as we are all facing in our homes, especially those of us with people doing online schooling. There is a tremendous stress on Wi-Fi. And I will say this, the Schlapp family wasn't exactly ready for this moment. We've had to make some emergency calls. I think we have 1 gig of Wi-Fi coming into our house because essentially, and you understand this, we're running 5 schools. And my wife Mercy is, working on the campaign, the Trump-Pence reelection campaign on a regular basis, and ACU is up and going. So there's a lot going on, and I think for all of us, I think Ian, one of the reasons we wanted to be on this show and get it going, and this is our inaugural CPAC Live, as Ian was saying, is we miss all of you. We can't believe, I don't know how many days it's been since CPAC, but I think we really, it's always a bonding experience. It's also, in some ways, makes you sick when you see how the fake news covers some aspects of CPAC. But for all of the great people who attend and everything, we miss you, and we wanted to reconnect with you. And Ian, we're going to do this regularly.
We're going to do it every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and hope that all of our friends will join us every day, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 11:30 a.m. Eastern. 11:30 a.m. Eastern. Schlapps, are you well stocked? Are you eating well? You got plenty of ammo to get through this?
We have done all the things that people do besides your computer needs. I had to get a new laptop. Yes, we have been going to Clark Brothers out in Virginia and purchasing the needed arsenal along with ammunition. If you don't have the ammunition, the arsenal doesn't do you much good. That's on top of buying a lot of frozen hams and turkeys and, steaks and frozen vegetables. And, we're not all Karen Walters, Ian. We can't always be ready for these moments when you got to be preparing your family in case things go in a bad way. I think the good news is, so many of us have been preparing since all these shutdown orders came out. And I have to say, I think the good news is that the shelves have by and large been stocked, besides the kind of infamous toilet paper situation. I guess if you had to stockpile anything, toilet paper, I wouldn't have picked that one, but okay. That seems to be where the Americans around the country are thinking. But the good news is that our system really isn't broken. The food is still getting into the stores. You can get what you need. You can get a lot of things sent to your house, as you all know. And I've learned a lot about online shopping. I don't prefer it, but I guess it's where we are. But how about you guys? Are the kids good and you're all healthy? And I know you guys have all the provisions you need.
Everyone is healthy around here. We're grateful to have this little bit of property to run around to get some outdoor time and take some nature walks with the kids. But I want to ask you, you and I rarely miss a Sunday at church. How have you guys been handling that over at the Schlapp house?
We're members of St. Mary's Parish in Old Town Alexandria, and Father Hathaway and the 5 or 6 priests that are in residence there have been doing very regularly, not only Sunday Mass, but other religious services throughout this whole process. And they actually do a really nice job. We all got assembled as a family last night, and you're really basically watching Mass, but of course God is everywhere. So we know he's with us and in our hearts and in our souls, and sustaining all of us through all of this. I find myself very distracted, as I'm sure we all do, as we think through some of the troublesome aspects of our politics and what's going on in our country. But there's something spiritual about this as well. I'm not saying God is the one who's behind all of the evil doing and the mistakes and the sloppiness of the communists in China who have brought about this global pandemic. But I do think when we have dark times, there can be some good that comes out of them. And what I see here is, as much as my wife would probably like to, kick me out of the house, because I think she's had enough of me, and I bet my kids have too, we're spending more time, quality time, if that's such a term, together than we really ever have. We used to always have dinner as a family, and then sometimes you get busy and the kids get busy and you stop doing that. Karn sends out this email on the CPAC rosary that my brother-in-law, Jason Searle, leads. It's not really a CPAC rosary. It's just a lot of people from CPAC are joining that prayer time. And that's at 8:15 Eastern time every night. We have a Protestant prayer time at 7:30 Eastern time. We have a Jewish prayer time. I do think people are coming together as a family. They're coming together as friends and family online through these Zoom calls and everything else. And I think I can't be the only American that finds myself searching out for answers from God. I think we're so many of us are doing that.
One of the big messages and feelings that we incorporate into the CPAC experience that we hope to convey with CPAC Live is this notion that you're not alone. That even if you're worshiping from home, that there are millions of like-minded conservatives like Matt Schlapp and Ian and all of our colleagues, and Dan Schneider and Karin and Michi and Zach and Chandler and Carly, who are all living through this together. And what a great opportunity it is for us to be connected. I'm looking at the public chat. We've got Julie Woods Hill out there wishing you hello, Matt Schlapp, Scott Nitzel, Ellie Martin, Mara Brockbank, lots of folks, Jeff Brain from Clout Hub. So we've got lots of our friends who are out there participating with us. Matt Schlapp, what should we all be looking for as far as getting this economy back to work? We've all been stuck in our house. Different states have different orders. Here in this area, you've got a Maryland order, a DC order, a Ralph Northern Virginia order. What should folks be looking for from their state leadership as far as when this thing is going to end and when we can begin loosening some of these restrictions so folks can get back to work?
Well, I think that we're going to have a big political, I hope it's not a crisis, but it could be, as the president wants to open up the economy and allow individual Americans to decide how they want to live their lives. I think we're going to have a lot of blue state governors that try to stand in the way of that, essentially block the ability of individuals to make those choices. I think one of the troubling things is you see some people in communities turning in their neighbors for not following the letter of the law that's come out from some of these governors and come out from some of these mayors. And I'm hoping very soon that the American people will realize that there's a balance to life. we all have to make our individual choices about how we live at this time of Chinese corona, and that there are risks in life. If I go to Walmart or Target to go pick up provisions for my family, there's a risk in that. There's a risk in filling your car up with gas. These are risks that you take, and we all have to deal with that. We can try to eliminate all that risk, but as we know, the human condition is you can't. And so that's the situation that we're in. And I think within short order, to me, the sanest voice, political voice out there is President Trump, is Governor Abbott, Governor Kristi Noem of South Dakota. These are the voices, I think, that have an idea that we can do this. We can come up with what this balance is. And that's what it's going to be going forward, because we have to remember, you don't really destroy a virus. You live amongst it.
Right.
You live with it. And we're going to be right back in the fall and the winter where there's going to be a lot of calls to shut down the economy again. And I hope that cooler heads, saner heads will prevail. And we simply learn how to operate within it. Think about this, Ian. If you own a restaurant, if you own a retail establishment, if you are involved in anything, sports or events, CPAC is a big event. Your livelihood has been decimated. And I think Americans realize that the business of America is business. We want to go back to work, and we need to.
I couldn't agree more. I want to remind folks that CPAC 2021 is February 24th to 27th of 2021, February 24th to 27th. And we're looking forward to being back in person with all of our friends, supporters, and the wonderful activists who help make that possible. Matt, there are a lot of questions coming in on the chat.
Good.
Asking about the CPAC attendance.
Ian, I can't see anything, so I'm this old guy.
Okay.
Look at
That's
them.
okay. You're not that. Well, a lot of them are asking about the CPAC attendee, our friend who tested positive for coronavirus a week after CPAC, and asking if that person is okay. Do you have any update that you can tell all of us?
Yeah, I'll talk about these. We had of course, the initial patient, and I'll talk about him in an anonymous way, because I just think we'll keep that going until he decides it's different from that. But my understanding, I've talked to him again today, and he's back at work and feeling great. And that's really good news. I mean, I've taken some criticism, including from some family members, when I said a couple of times on Fox News that the CPAC experience was that it was difficult to contract coronavirus. And we were talking about that today, which is with 10,000 people walking around that event, that it's still kind of shocking to me that we didn't have hundreds of cases come out of CPAC. So I'm not a doctor. I don't understand the chemistry or the biology, but it's interesting that there was a lot of interaction with people, with this patient. We know of another person who, after they left CPAC, they tested positive. I'm sure there are other people that were at CPAC that may have tested positive, but we didn't really have an outbreak. And I actually think, I'm not saying that because I'm deluding myself of the tragic moment that we're in with people who are dying and people who are seriously sick, but I actually think it's just accurate and hopeful, which is, not everybody gets the symptoms if they're exposed to somebody who's positive. And obviously, the overwhelming percentage of people survive. That's good news. That's not just trying to to sugarcoat the tough situation we're in. I think we grieve for anybody who's lost their life. Good news is that there's a lot of hope here as well.
Our theme at CPAC 2020, as you recall, was America versus socialism. I've done a handful of interviews with reporters who want to say to me that small government conservatism is dead as a result of these trillions of dollars that have been spent. What's your thoughts on the state of conservatism at this moment, what our principles are, and how we're going to get back to them, despite a lot of what we see coming from Capitol Hill.
Nobody likes the type of spending, the levels of spending that the federal government and other levels of government are engaged in. I think all conservatives say, look, that just makes me uneasy. But the one thing I love about being a conservative is that it's based in reality. Most of the people that are with us today during the CPAC live show or come to our events or we're at CPAC, a lot of them run businesses, they're involved in businesses, they're involved in charities. And the thing about conservatives, we're grounded in the dollars and the cents and what makes sense. And I'm sure President Trump and other Republicans, the last thing they ever wanted to do was to give out these checks and to try to somehow keep the economy going through this temporary use of government money. And it's a tremendous amount of money. That being said, is conservative looks at the alternatives. What was the alternative? The government tells you you're not allowed to open up your restaurant, which is an economic taking. That's depriving you of your economic rights, and they don't have to come up with a financial settlement. That's not consistent with our values. You know, if the government takes something of mine away, they should settle up with me, and that's a core constitutional principle. And I think that's what we're seeing here. Now, the Democrats in this version 4 or 3.5, as some people are calling it, you know, the Democrats, they're going to be true to nature. They are going to call for the bailout of every union, hospital, university, city, state. You know, the state of Illinois has been broke for years, and they're going to use this emergency as a way to have a bailout for California, for Illinois, and New York. And I just hope that we hold the line. We better hold the line because we just simply don't have the money to pay the tabs for all the mistakes these blue-run states have been making for a couple of decades.
There is an interesting thought. Look, before coronavirus, it was the best economy in a century here in America. The president's approval ratings were highest they've been in 3 years. And suddenly, this thing looks like it's tailor-made for progressives and Democrats. You had people saying the only way we're going to get Trump out of office is if there's a recession, and whoop-de-doo, look at what we got here. We have a massive economic fallout. Are Democrats really eager to get back to work, or are they going to try to leverage the politics on this tragedy for as long as they can in order to have an impact in November?
Look, the only prominent Democrat I've heard say that we're going to need to really seriously think about how to get back to work is Governor Cuomo, who has said plenty of other things that made me pretty upset. But, you know, the state of New York, the financial capital of really the world, it needs to get back to work. And he knows that. But I think what you're hearing from most Democrats is there's an alignment between, number one, I just think most conservative activists don't like the idea of the government telling you that you can't leave your house, that you can't go to church, that you can't do things that you want to do to take care of your family. You know, it's okay to go to Planned Parenthood, and that's considered emergency services, but it's not okay to go to church. And so for most conservatives, we are disquieted by this idea of government telling us what to do. And so when government does tell us what to do, we want it to be for as short a duration as possible while we challenge it in court.
Right.
Now, I think the difference here is President Trump came out and said, look, we need to do these things in order to, they kept saying, to bring down the peak or the curve or the flatten the curve. And I think most of us said, that's a reasonable thing for a period of time, but a period of time eventually ends. You remember, Ian, at CPAC, I got asked many times because I quarantined after interaction with this one patient, and people kept saying, "Are you quarantining? How many days?" And I kept saying, "I'm just taking it one day at a time."
That's right.
I still feel like I'm doing that, one day at a time. Today, I make a decision for how we're going to operate. But I'm not really listening to Governor Northam of the Commonwealth of Virginia. I think he's hysterical. I think he lacks credibility. And I think too many governors are trying to make a name for themselves fighting President Trump instead of just looking at the situation we face and try to make good decisions. And I think there's way too much politics in this.
I'm told he's a very good moonwalker.
He's a great moonwalker.
At some point, Governor Northam is going to have to let the Constitution out of quarantine as well.
Ian, I said that I was going to shave my white whiskers when this is over faster than Governor Northam applied blackface on his. That's how I feel, which is I think he lacks all credibility. And I think this is a moment for actually some Democrats to speak up and just do what's in the interest of the country and
I'd love to see that.
not make it always about hating Trump. It gets old. It's really a broken record.
I'd love to see that. Some of our questions, Matt, thank you for having this webinar from Frank the Bodyguard, your friend there.
Great.
A lot of folks are asking about the RNC and whether that's going to happen in August. I think that was still on the books. Chairwoman McDaniel said we're still planning to have it.
Right.
And as I look at our CPAC schedule, folks, we're still planning to be at CPAC West in Reno, August 7th to 8th, CPAC Wisconsin later in August, CPAC Pennsylvania in September, North Carolina in October, Michigan in October, and we're coming back to Minnesota, Representative Ilhan Omar, sometime in October as well. Okay, before we shift to presidential politics, Matt, I have a special surprise for everybody who's watching. From our friends over at the Morning Joe program with MSNBC. Let's take a look.
Barack Obama.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Senator, anything to report? Successful dump. I dropped everything at the dump. It all worked out. And by the way, I got a second load, guys coming. Anybody wants to help me unload? That Chuck Graham, state senator's here. Chuck, stand up, Chuck. Let him see you. Oh, God love you. What am I talking about? I tell you what, you're making everybody else stand up, though, pal. Thank you very, very much. I tell you what, stand up for Chuck. My mother believed and my father believed that if I wanted to be president of the United States, I could be vice president. My mother and father believed. Look, John's last-minute economic plan does nothing to tackle the number one job facing the middle class. And it happens to be, as Barack says, a three-letter word, jobs. J-O-B-S, jobs.
Joe, you want to administer the oath?
Am I doing this again?
For the
The
senior
senior
staff.
staff, all right.
A number of the cabinet members have already.
My memory is not as good as Justice Roberts, Chief Justice Roberts. Does anyone have the, no, And thank you, Dr. Pepper, and thank you, Chancellor, or Dr. Paper, and thank you, Chancellor. A man who will be the next president of the United States, Barack America. But the Taoiseach knows a lot about it. His mom lived in Long Island for 10 years or so. God rest her soul. And although wait, your mom's still alive as your dad passed. God bless her soul. I got to get this straight. Now is the time to heed the timeless advice from Teddy Roosevelt. Speak softly and carry a big stick. End of quote. I promise you, the president has a big stick. I promise you.
Schlapp, this is the guy that the Democrats have put up to save the world, to take out Orange Man bad, to better conduct the governance of America. What have they done?
Well, I have to say to Priscilla and Jerry O'Shaughnessy, Priscilla's on our board, and both of them have kind of reminded me that these really aren't gaffes. Joe Biden, yes, he makes a lot of mistakes, but it's not like, oh, these are little harmless mistakes. I think, number one, I think he's incredibly deceptive with his political rhetoric. He stirs up so much racial animosity and everything else in an attempt to tear down Trump. But he also, he's lost his marbles. He didn't have that many marbles to begin with, but he's lost them. And everyone knows it. And everybody, by the way, in green rooms and across in news organizations. They all know it. The question is, Ian, will the Democrats allow Joe Biden to be the nominee? Will they insert somebody else in the for the nomination? What will they do? It's really interesting, and I think it's really telling that Barack Obama didn't endorse Joe Biden until everybody else had already voted for him in the Democratic Party. I mean, that's kind of bizarre.
Where do you think this move, this push to do mail-in voting is headed?
I think it's a Democrat core principle, which is the president called him out on this in 2016 with so much voter fraud. And what you realize is in life and in politics is people use terms. So we say voter fraud, and the Democrats say, well, you can't prove that that there's really any widespread voter fraud. And then we try to prove that there is voter fraud, and then something happens like what California did with these absentee ballots. So just so you know, it's
ballot harvesting.
It's a term of art, voter fraud. But here, let me ask you this question. Is this fraud? Somebody asks for an absentee ballot, and you, as a Democratic official, go get that ballot. That ballot could be filled out. That ballot might not be filled out. But nobody is watching you with the custody of that ballot as you then get to turn it in for that voter. Now, that's a fundamental hazard for criminal activity, that someone can take your absentee ballot, could be empty on the presidential contest. Maybe they voted for something else. How does anyone know that you didn't fill in any of those little ovals? And I think when the presidency is determined, when the nation is pretty much 50-50 and the presidency is determined by thousands of votes in precincts, right? It's tight. I think this is alarming. And why did the Democrats want to have the moral hazard of more slipshod opportunities where people can do things that are illegal that we can't prove? Well, because this is the way. You asked Norm Coleman, and we had Senator Norm Coleman at CPAC. And I know you said the Nissels were on with us now. Norm Coleman, the problem for Republicans when they win in bluish states is they can be leading at election night, but if it's tight enough, almost every time they recount, somehow that lead seems to go away. And next thing you know, they're behind. Dino Rossi in Washington State had this happen to him twice. This happens all the time. How come I can't cite a Democrat, right, who was up on election night and with every recount, all of a sudden the Republican won? Because I just don't think Republicans play the game that way.
Al Gore. How about that one?
Yeah, Al Gore. I concede. I don't concede. I concede again.
I see a lot of questions are still coming in. Thank you for your questions. Don't forget, you can reach out to us at CPAC@conservative.org, right? CPAC@conservative.org. If we didn't get your questions today, Carrie, Janig, let us know what you'd like to talk about. Happy to talk to you. James, love to have you volunteer with us. But here's an interesting one from Amy Schaefer, Matt. What are some key things activists can do right now to help candidates?
Well, that's a great question. The first thing is stay engaged, right? People are talking to each other just in new ways, but I don't think the intensity has lessened at all. I'll tell you another thing is, I don't know if any of you agree with me, I can't watch much news. It's regurgitation of panic and hype. And there are very few moments over the course of the last couple of weeks where I've actually learned a lot. I tell you where I have learned: the president's briefings. I think those have been the place to actually get the information. And I think campaigns that succeed are campaigns that are going to adapt to the current situation. I think the same thing is true for all of us who are simply conservative activists. We're going to do better if we adapt to the situation. So I'd say if I'm out there living in my home state of Kansas and I want to be engaged, if you see your governor doing irresponsible things, this is the time to take the social media and to push back. We have to fight in new ways. And look, this is about our civil liberties and the Bill of Rights and what the government can and can't do. Like I said, I think the president has acted very responsibly in the wake of this virus, but there is no question that he wants to get the economy back open as fast as it can, especially in those states that have the least incidence of people sick with the virus. And I think this is going to be a showdown. And activists better be ready for this moment, or I fear that the centralized planning of the leftist Democratic Party, which is now a socialist party, will, they like the idea of the government telling us what to do. And I think they will prolong a shutdown unnecessarily because it's just their nature.
Matt, before we get out of here, I want to remind all of our viewers that we'll be back Wednesday and Friday, same bat time, same bat channel at 11:30 a.m. Eastern, Wednesday and Friday. We'll send you an email on Tuesday. Don't be afraid or hesitate to reach out to us if there are topics you'd like us to highlight, if there are speakers you'd like us to take a look at. Matt, before you take us home, I want to remind folks, then they'll see this in the ACU documentary in a few weeks when it's available on their streaming services, that we were the first American group to go out there and support the Hong Kong student protest movement. This was an early warning sign about how the Chi-Coms were going to operate in a crisis. They've been funding, they've been supporting a corrupt police force there. They've been detaining young men and women to prevent them from protesting, from making their voices heard. They've been using facial recognition software and technology to figure out who to imprison inappropriately. And our friend, your friend, Jimmy Lai, was just arrested. We're obviously going to talk about China later this week, but wanted to get this first one in the can with our CPAC 2020 family. Matt, one word about what we should be looking for as we follow the news from our friends in Hong Kong, and then take us home, buddy.
Yeah, well, I just say to Jimmy Lai and to these brave freedom fighters in Hong Kong that, we stand with you in solidarity. What the Chinese are going to try to do in Hong Kong is to use this health emergency to shut down these democratic voices. And this is the true American spirit. That's why they wave our flag and sing our anthem on the streets of Hong Kong, because they feel a kindred spirit with our founders. So Jimmy, and to all the other Andy Chan and to all the other freedom fighters in Hong Kong, we stand with you. And I think, Ian, what we ought to do in our very next show, we've kind of set the table here with some big themes, but now we got to dig into some of these questions about how do we deal with China? What happens with Hong Kong? What about these international bodies like the WHO and the UN that have let us down time and time again? It's a time to rethink some of these big strategic global questions. And we want to have these conversations with you like we do at each one of our CPAC events. So we're going to bring some members of our board, some people who we do a lot of work with, and talk about these issues. We want to talk about the health consequences of this. We want to talk about the Chinese consequences and what do we do with the communist government in China. And we got to talk about the economy and what are we going to do to get through this moment. And I think we are going to get through it. Those are the types of things we're going to be jumping in on. And we want you to join us for our prayer sessions if you're so inclined. And hopefully you'll join us again Wednesday at 11:30.
Folks, thanks so much for joining us for episode 1 of CPAC Live. Stay safe, be good, reach out to us, let us know what you think, let us know what you want to hear us talk about.
Yeah,
and
give us feedback.
We will see you on Wednesday at 11:30 a.m. Thanks, everybody.